This morning I wanted to start with by asking you as an individual, a question, and I want you to think about your answer. I don't want out loud answers, and I don't want hands raised or anything like that, but I want you to think and I want you to hold on to the answer to this question through the duration of this lesson. But my question is, how badly do you want to see this congregation grow? How badly do you want to see this congregation succeed and thrive? I want you to think about that answer, and I want you to hold on to it and remember it throughout the remainder of this study. We're going to look at a congregation in the New Testament that was thriving, that was growing every day. And we're going to look at least one of the things they were doing to try to figure out what were they doing that caused them to succeed so much, to thrive so well. And we'll find in Acts chapter 2, verses 41 through 47, this is the very first congregation of Christianity. This is the very first church of Christianity. And this was just after Pentecost, where Peter preaches the very first gospel sermon, as we call it, where thousands of people came and were baptized and were washed in the blood of Christ and became disciples. In Acts 2, verse 41, it says, "Those who gladly received his word were baptized, and that day of Pentecost, about 3,000 souls were added to them. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, in the breaking of bread and in prayers. Then fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. Now all who believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods, and divided them among all as anyone had need. So continuing daily in one accord, or with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, they ate their food with gladness and simplicity of heart, praising God and having favor with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily those who were being saved." I want us to imagine this. So this very first congregation starts out with the apostles and the people that were there when Jesus ascended. And on the day of Pentecost, 3,000 souls were added to them. And every day since then, it grew more and more and more. Every day, the Lord was adding souls to the church. That's thriving. That's not just surviving. You know, we look around at the church today, and a lot of them are just, congregations are surviving, right? They're just getting by. It's not a whole lot happening. There's not a lot of growth happening, either spiritually or in number. They're just there. This church is surviving and thriving. Every day they're growing, not just in number, but in spirituality. They're growing in their faith with the apostles' doctrine, with their works. How did they do that? And we can look at a lot of things this church is doing. In fact, if, Lord willing, I'm working on other things with this passage that we can go through that we'll find other things they were doing as well. But this morning, I want to focus on this one aspect of verse 44. All who believed were together and had all things in common, and sold their possessions and goods and divided them among all as anyone had need. See, one very fundamental thing that this congregation was doing is that every single one of them was involved. They all were together. They all had all things in common. They all sold their possessions and goods and all divided them among all as any had need. They all stood fast on the apostles' doctrine. They all did all of these things. What should that tell us today? That should tell us today that if we want this congregation to thrive and grow and succeed, it takes all of us. It takes us all. So we're going to look at a few passages this morning that help us understand why it takes all of us. We'll start off at 1 Corinthians 12, and we'll read verses 14 through 24. It says, "For in fact," this is Paul speaking to the Corinthian church, the church that was so horribly divided that Paul chastises them throughout this entire letter. He says, "For in fact, the body," and he's talking about the church, he calls the church a body, "is not one member, but many. If the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not part of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? But now God has set the members, each one of them, in the body, just as He pleased. And if they were all one member, where would the body be? But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And those members of the body which we think to be less honorable, on these we bestow greater honor. And our unpresentable parts have greater modesty, but our presentable parts have no need. But God composed the body, having given greater honor to the part which lacks it." There's a lot of things we could take from this passage, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into it as well. But what I mainly want us to get from this passage is that if you have become a member of this body, you have a function. You are supposed to play a role. Every member has been put where it is because that's where God knew it would work best. And you know what's really interesting over here? The members of the body which seem to be weaker, they're necessary. They're needed. That tells me that we need every single member of this congregational body to be doing something. That we're all important. I'll be honest, until yesterday when Ashlyn looked it up and told me, I have no idea what the spleen does. I don't know. I know it's an organ, and Ashlyn told me yesterday it has something to do with filtering your blood. I don't know. I don't know how it does that, where it is in your... I don't know what it does, but I know it's important. You know how I know it's important? Because I've got a buddy who was in a car crash and he lost his spleen, and now he wears a bracelet that says, I don't have a spleen. You know why? So if medical professionals find him, if there's something else happens, they know, hey, he's missing a spleen. There's a different way we have to take care of this situation. That means the spleen's important. Can the body survive without it? Apparently. He's doing fine. But it's still important. It still has a function. And without that, his body's having to make up for things that are lacking. Every member of your body is important. And every member of Christ's body is important. And there's not one of us that can say, I'm not that important. Not one of us. And there's not one of us that can say, Jeremy's not that important, or Nathan, or whoever else. We're all important in the body of Christ. We all have a function that we must do in order for the body to grow and thrive. In Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 16, says, He himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of the ministry, for the edifying or building up of the body of Christ, till we all come to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. That we should no longer be children, tossed to and fro, carried about with every wind of doctrine by the trickery of men and the cunning craftiness of deceitful plotting. But speaking the truth in love may grow up into all things into him who is the head, Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. You know how the body is supposed to grow? Every part does its share. Every joint does its job. Every appendage, the hands, the feet, they all do their job. And that causes growth. I used to work with a guy who had torn his rotator cuff. And apparently he tore it so bad he was out for like 2 weeks after surgery. Of course, he tore it and then he kept working for 2 years. I don't know how he did it, but it got to the point where he couldn't lift his arm above here without excruciating pain. Now, you might think, it's just a rotator cuff. It's not that important. A lot of my job, a lot of his job is up here. It's all up here. Because we're electricians. That's what we do, everything above our heads. And if you can't raise your hand above here, it's really hard to do your job up here. Which means it's not just his shoulder that's in trouble. It's his forearm. It's his elbow. It's his hand. His fingers. They can't do their job effectively because his shoulder doesn't move. And of course, he's had surgery since then, and I think he's getting not full range of motion, but it's better. I haven't talked to him in a while. I don't work with him anymore, but that's how important we all are to the body. If you're not doing your job, you cause the rest of the body to fall behind. It's not just you that's in trouble if you're not doing your job. It's the rest of us having to pick up the slack. The rest of us suffer because there are members that don't do their job, and that hinders growth. That hinders thriving. All of us are important. And it gives us a list here. Paul gives us a list here of apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. Those are important things. Those are important fields. And of course, we don't have apostles anymore and prophets. That was first century miraculous times. We don't have that in that sense. But we still have evangelists, pastors, and teachers, right? Evangelists, elders, bishops, pastors, teachers. All those three things are the same thing. Pastors, elder, and bishop. All does the same job. We still have those things, and they have a specific role. And that role is equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And that word saint just means the sanctified. Those who have been set apart. Those who have been saved. That's the rest of us. So it's not all on the evangelists to do the work. It's not all on the teachers to do the work. It's not all on the elders or pastors to do the work. It's on all of us. And if they're not doing their job, the saints don't get the equipping they need to do the work as well. It's all interconnected. We're all part of the same team. And if one part of that team is not doing the job, the rest of the team suffers. In Romans 12, verses 3 through 8, Paul says, "For I say, through grace given to me to everyone who is among you, for I say through the grace given to me to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. As God has dealt to each one a measure of faith, for as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, and individually members of one another. Having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, let us prophesy in proportion to our faith. Or ministry, let us use it in our ministering. He who teaches, in teaching. He who exhorts, in exhortation. He who gives, with liberality. He who leads, with diligence. He who shows mercy, with cheerfulness." See, you and I don't have the same function. Even those of us who are teachers in this congregation, we don't all have the same job. I can't do all of the things that Jeremy can do. And he's right here, that's why I'm picking on him. But I can't do all the same things as Marcus. And you know, the same is true. Marcus can't do all the same things that I can do, at least as effectively. I think Abraham Lincoln said, "Every man is superior to me in some way." Everybody is better than me in some way. And you know what? We were built to be that way. Because all of us have a different part to play. We can go back to 1 Corinthians 12 where he says, if the whole body were a foot, where would be the hand, right? Can you imagine that? Just a head and a foot walking around? That's not a body. We need all of the parts to be doing their share. And if let's just say your talent, the thing that you can do best is ministering, and you don't do that job, guess what still has to be done? Ministering. Ministry still must take place in the body. And if you're not doing your job, somebody who might be better at exhortation then has to pull off of that a little bit and give his attention to the ministry. You know what that means? Ministry is not getting done as well as it should be. And neither is exhortation. Because he's having to divide his attention. You know, there's a lot of videos or a lot of, documentaries of people who, the one I saw was somebody who had lost his sight at a really, really young age. And they were interviewing this guy while he's riding a bike. Completely blind, can't see a thing. But he's out riding a bike in New York. It's crazy. But what he was telling the interviewer is, I use echolocation to get around. And he's clicking his tongue, and he says, when I click my tongue, I can hear the echo bouncing off of things. I don't know how you can do that in New York, it's so loud, but he's figured out a way to get around. But I'm watching him ride his bike, and he's so wobbly. Like, it's very ineffective, the way he rides his bike. It gets him from place to place, but I almost feel like it'd be better if he just walked, honestly, because it wasn't any faster. But he's able to get around. He's able to ride his bike, but not as effectively as he could have been if he could see. The body is going to continue to do the work. This congregation here is going to continue to work. But we can't do it as effectively if there are parts that are not doing their job. If you want this congregation to thrive, every part must do its job. Otherwise, we become ineffective. We can go back to 1 Corinthians 12, verses 15 through 17. It says, if the foot should say, because I am not a hand, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the ear should say, because I am not an eye, I am not of the body, is it therefore not of the body? If the whole body were an eye, where would be the hearing? If the whole were hearing, where would be the smelling? I kind of paraphrased that earlier and I got it wrong, but you kind of got the point. It's not just that if a member doesn't function, they hinder the body. That's important. It's a very important thing that you need to understand that if you're not doing your job, you're hurting the rest of us. You're hindering the rest of us. But we also need to understand that you're just also hurting yourself. You're hurting yourself. You have been put into the body for a specific task, for a specific role. Maybe you don't know what that role is, and we can work on that, but you have a job to do. If you're not doing that, let's just say you're a hand. If my hand suddenly stops working, what good is it? If my hand were to say, you know what, I wanted to be an eye, and just quits, well, then I've got a useless appendage. You know what happens to muscles that aren't exercised? They die. They shrivel up. You know what happens to organs that shut down? They have to be removed. I know very little about anatomy, but I know that if some of my body parts stop functioning, that's an issue. And it's got to be fixed or taken out. I think we all kind of understand that as well. So how can we look at the body of Christ, this congregation here, and go, you know what? I don't have to do anything. I'm not that important. God says you are. God thought you were so important and your job was so important that He put you in that position. He put you in that role. And you're going to tell Him you don't have to do it, that you can't, that you're not good enough for it? God says you are. In Ephesians 4, verse 16, it says, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies, according to the effective working by which every part does its share, causes growth of the body. In order for the body to grow, it must have every part doing its share. It has to build on itself. And if there are parts that are not doing their share, it hurts the body and it hurts themselves. Sorry, I'm kind of repetitive here. I lost my place, that's why. But the body can't grow effectively if we're not all doing our part. And that means parts will be cut off, parts will be thrown out, they'll die, they'll atrophy, and then other parts suffer. Proverbs 10 and verse 26 says, as vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy man to those who send him. I jumped ahead when I was talking about harming and hindering itself. This is still on the topic of hindering the body. But here this proverb, it says, the lazy man to those who send him is like smoke. Have you ever had smoke in your eyes? It's uncomfortable, right? It's irritating. That's the word. It's irritant. It's irritating. Your eyes get all red. It's hard to see, right? Next morning, it still hurts. That's what it's like to send somebody to do a job that you know they're not going to do because they're lazy. Now, I want you to think about the body for a moment. You've been given a task. You've been given a job. If you're not doing it, you're an irritant to the body. I don't think any of us wants to be an irritant to the body, right? I would hope not. That we don't want to be irritating. We don't want to be annoying. We don't want to be that guy that whenever, leadership has a meeting, they go, well, we could ask him, but I don't know if he'll do it. That puts a lot of strain on people. Because you want that person to grow. You want that person to do better. You want that person to have that responsibility, but I don't know if they'll do it. And then when they don't, you go, what can we do? And there are leaderships all throughout the church having those discussions. Because there's jobs to be done. And the people they have are the people they have. Somebody's got to do it. And we can trust that person, but can we really? Do you really want to be that person? Do you want to be the irritant to the body, the smoke in the eyes of the body? Or do you want to be trusted? That if there's a job that needs done, you're willing to do it and not cause harm. I love Brother Bob. He's a very great person. He does a lot of work here at this congregation. He can't do it all. I know that's hard, Bob. I know that's hard to hear, but you just can't do it all. None of us can. We have to trust everyone in this room. We have to. Because one day, Brother Bob's not going to be here. One day, Brother Roy's not going to be here. Brother Jeremy's not going to be here. Nathan's not going to be here. Marcus isn't going to be here. And who's going to pick up the torch? Can we trust you to do it? Can we trust you now? Or are you the smoke in the eyes? And like I said earlier when I got ahead of myself, you're not just hurting all of us, you're hurting yourself. In Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30, Jesus gives this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his own ability. Now that's interesting, that he gave the 5-talent man 5 talents, not because he wanted to push him and make him better, but because he knew he could handle it. And he gave 2 to the one that had 2 because he could handle it. He gave 1 to the one because that's what he can handle. And we're no different today in the body. We've all been given tasks because we can handle them. Because God knows we can do it. The question is, will we? Immediately he went on a journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. Talents, by the way, if you're unaware, talent is just a measure of money of some kind. It's a lot of money. So, likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came and settled accounts with them. He who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I've gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He who had received the 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I've gained 2 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you had not sown, and gathering where you had not scattered seed, and I was afraid, and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers. At my coming I would have received back mine own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. If you don't do the job God's giving you to do by placing you in his body, do you think you'll be any different than the 1-talent man? The one that said, I'm too afraid to do anything with this, to do this task, so I'm just going to hide it. And then when his Lord comes, he says, look, here it is. Good enough, right? Was it good enough? The Lord tells him, you could have done something. You could have done something. Put it in the bank. Get interest. Something. But he did nothing. Because he was lazy. Because he was wicked. That's harsh words, right? Those are harsh words. Wicked and lazy servant. Is that what you want to hear? I don't want to hear that. You wicked and lazy servant, you should have done something. You could have done something. See, this isn't just about you hindering the growth of the body. It's about you hindering your own soul's eternity. It's self-harm. When we do nothing, when we don't do the job that's been given to us to do. So there's no bench warmers in the body. Our job as a church member is not just to come to church on Sunday. That's part of your job, sure. But that's not your job. You have a role to play. And your role is not just a passive participant of the body. There are no passive participants of the body. Those are called dead parts. That's when you remove parts. In John 15, verses 1 through 6, Jesus says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you, as a branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit, for without me you could do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered. And they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. When you have a fruit tree of some kind, I think he's talking about olives or grapes here, but when you have some kind of fruit-bearing plant, if a branch does not produce fruit, it's useless. If a tree does not produce fruit, it's useless. And those trees and those branches are cut away to make room for branches that will bear fruit. If there is members of a body that don't bear fruit, that don't work, that don't do their job, what do you think he's going to do with them? What do you think he does to members of his vine that don't produce anything, that don't do the work? They're cut off. So that the branches that do produce fruit can produce more fruit. Because that branch is not taking up the nutrients that the others need. In Romans 11, verses 19 through 21, Paul kind of expands on this idea. And he's talking about the relationship of Jewish converts and Gentile converts, and those of the Jews that did not believe in Christ. And he's talking to Gentiles here. He says, you will say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said. You're right. Because of unbelief they were broken off, and you stand by faith. Do not be haughty, but fear, for if God did not spare the natural branches, the Jews, he may not spare you either. You've been grafted into the body. You've been grafted into the vine of Christ. And if you're not aware, grafting is where you take a branch or part of a plant and put it onto, I don't know how exactly they do it, but they cut off a piece of the thriving plant, put that branch on that plant, and it continues to thrive and grow. It's a very, very old practice, and it still works. In fact, I think it works better now, if anything. But that's what this is talking about. Is you cut off a dead or dying branch, you put on a different branch in its place, and that produces better or more fruit. They even get crossbred plants that way. They graft like pear branches onto apple trees, and it's really interesting if you look it up. But that's kind of the basic idea, is you take a branch from another tree and put it on this tree. He says, if God didn't spare the natural branches, the ones that were already there that grew up in it, do you really think he won't break off the branches he grafted in? You were added. You can be subtracted. There's no sidelines. There's no audience members of the body. What I mean is we're all active participants. When you're at a stadium, when you're watching a game, a lot of people will say, my team, we did this. I'm an Oklahoma State fan. I watched their last game, and I was very upset about it. But when I talk about Oklahoma State, sometimes I say we, right? We do this, or we need to do this. We need this, that, or the other. We need to fire. Anyway, I say we because that's my team. I'm not an active participant in Oklahoma State football. I never was. I was never going to be. But I consider myself part of it. I'm not part of it. I'm not on the field. I have no way to help or hinder the game other than I watch it and that gets them some kind of viewer money. I don't know. And that's how it works in the church. There's no audience members of the church. You're either in the game or you're not. You're either on the team or you're not. And you and I know that players that don't do their job don't get put in. It doesn't just hurt the rest of us when you don't do the job you were given. It hurts you spiritually and eternally. So I'll go back to my question when we started. How badly do you want this church to grow, to succeed, to thrive? And I'll ask you a follow-up. Think about your answer from before. Think about what you were thinking, and let me ask you a follow-up. Are you willing to do the work for it? Are you willing to put in the work that it takes to get this kind of church? This Acts 2, adding to them daily. They were growing in faith. They were growing in spirituality. What are you willing to do to get that? Because we have to do something. You've been given a role. You need to fulfill it. You need to be an active participant in the body. There's a song I like called The Rest of My Life. And the basic premise of the song is, and the hook is, what a great way to start the first day of the rest of my life. That's the song hook. And in the bridge of that song, he sings a line that I really think is applicable here. He says, I'm turning into something a little less promising and a little more useful. We're all promising. Like we're all part of the body and God has put us in a position to where we are promising. We have things that we can do. The question is, are you just promising or are you useful? And I implore you now, I beg you now, be a little less promising. Be a little more useful. Because we need you. Because we want this body to grow. We want this body to thrive. And it's going to take all.